All right.
All right, thank you very much and welcome to the State Route 37 Policy Committee of Thursday, October 7th, 2021. Drew, you want to just do a roll call?
Absolutely. Good morning, State Route 37 Policy Committee. I will be taking roll alphabetically by county. We'll start with the County of Napa. Mayor Leon Garcia.
Here.
Supervisor Alfredo Pedrosa.
Here.
Supervisor Belia Ramos. I don't see. County of Marin. Supervisor Judy Arnold.
Here.
Supervisor Damon Connolly.
Here.
Councilmember Eric Lucan.
Here.
County of Solano. Mayor Robert McConnell.
Here.
Vice Chair Aaron Hannigan.
Here.
And then Supervisor Jim Spearing's office informed me that he would not be able to attend today. County of Sonoma. Councilmember Victoria Fleming.
Morning.
Supervisor Susan Gorin, who I don't see, and then Chair David Rabbit.
Here.
And then with Caltrans District 4 Director Dina L. Twanzi.
Here.
Andrew Fremier from MTC, which I don't see. And then Executive Director Daryl Halls from Solano Transportation Authority.
Here.
Executive Director Kate Miller from Napa Valley Transportation Authority.
Here.
Executive Director Ann Richmond from Transportation Authority of Marin.
Here.
And Suzanne Smith, Executive Director of Sonoma County Transportation Authority.
Here.
Great, thank you very much, Drew. Appreciate that. We'll move on then to item number 2, which is opportunities for public comment. And I'll look, I see one hand raised and actually 2. And Steve Bertelbaugh, please go ahead.
Let me permit him. Alrighty, Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rabbit and members. Steve Bertelbaugh. The State Route 37 Working Group for the Sierra Club sent out a letter yesterday, which I hope you've all had a chance to see. We're very concerned that while Caltrans in putting together the purpose and need statement for the Pell evaluation did include the ecological resistance to the purpose and need. The statement doesn't acknowledge the need to greatly reduce greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled. That has a particular effect on the short-term, long-term reductions in greenhouse gases. The early provision of rail services. It also ducks the fact that 4-lane road could invite much more solo driving, contrary to the efforts to address the climate crisis. So bottom line is that we urge you to include the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as part of the purpose and need for this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Drew, you want to go ahead?
I can do that for you. Next I have in line is a Rick Lutman. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Rick Lutman. I live in Roanoke Park, and I'm the League of Women Voters representative to the Citizens Advisory Committee to SCTA. Apologies to those of you who were at the Smart Board meeting yesterday. I'm going to repeat myself. I've been attending a number of these Highway 37 discussions, and I'm rather disappointed actually in the lack of enthusiasm for rail as an alternative way to get across the north side of the bay. There is a railroad that SMART controls between Novato and the Napa River. Then another railroad controls the tracks to Sassoon. The impression I get is that there's lip service given to rail, but then everybody goes back to starting to talk about pouring concrete. The track between Novato and the Napa River is already there, and it's already in use for freight. That could be turned into a viable passenger service with some rudimentary stations at Napa River and Shelville, and perhaps also Sears Point. It would be easy to do, and it could be done very quickly, relieving the congestion that is already vexing a lot of people who use Highway 37. Now, SMART, it doesn't have the money to do this, but on the other hand, it's not SMART's problem. It's Caltrans' problem, it's the MTC's problem. These are large, powerful organizations which could surely get the money together. I doubt it would be very much to open some passenger service in the near future. Rail is the future. There's no doubt about it. We're going back to where we were in the 19th century because internal combustion engines are causing a lot of problems. That's where our greenhouse gases are coming from. Long term, we've got to go to rail. There's just no reason we can't start now with a short-term solution. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Letman. Next in line, I have a Jack Swearingen. Jack, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the chair of Friends of Smart, which is a citizens advocacy group. Had a Zoom meeting of our own just before the Smart Zoom meeting, board Zoom meeting yesterday. And I had 2 other Zoom meetings. I finished the day pretty exhausted, as you must suspect. The last one was a webinar sponsored by Mike McGuire on climate. Some of you may have heard that, but one of the quotes from the expert there was, make the lowest carbon choices that you can. And you folks are facing some choices, and I don't see that you're making the lowest carbon choice that you can. It seems to me that that rubric would preclude increasing capacity of any highway by adding lanes, pouring concrete, as Rick would say. Your goal and Caltrans' goal should be moving people, not moving vehicles. The appeal to electric vehicles is not an exit at this time because the cost investment required to triple the size of the grid to fuel electric vehicles is a big obstacle for the next 20 years. And for that matter, nobody's going to junk all their IC engine vehicles to switch to electric all at once. We have a crisis. The crisis cannot be solved by adding lanes and moving more vehicles. We simply must go to lower carbon alternatives, and rail is certainly one of those. So thanks much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Next in line, I have Ed Schultze. Ed, I have permitted you to speak, Ed. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Okay, am I clear?
You're clear.
Great, okay. My concern is the 121 intersection. I've seen one diagram for a roundabout. And I talked to a long distance moving van hauler, and he said roundabouts can be disasters if you have people you don't trust on the right-hand side when they merge to you. He said it's big on the East Coast, but as you get west, he said people aren't familiar with it. And it's hard to handle a large truck. I also talked to a hay hauler who hauls hay from Oregon, Nevada, and Utah all the way across into us, and it supports Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino County with hay. And he said roundabouts can be disasters for large trucks. I'd like to see possibly a diagram of elevated intersections like they have in other areas. At one time, you could drive from 101 to 80 with 5 lights. Now there's only 2, one at Sears Point and one at Lakeville. It'd be nice if we could eliminate those. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Chair Rabbit, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on item 2.
Great, thank you, Drew. Appreciate that, and thank you to those who spoke. I'll just say this: I think that this is the State Route 37 Policy Committee, but we do talk about the corridor quite a bit. And when we do talk about the corridor, we talk about multimodal transportation, including bus, bike, ped, vehicles, as well as rail. But we are focusing on this particular project because we have to scale it to something that's achievable. And as it is, we've been at this for better part of 10 years. So with that, we'll move on and say thank you very much to the consent calendar. The consent calendar today is 3 items: 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. It's minutes, correspondence, and authorization to follow AB 361 in terms of virtual meetings. Anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns on any of those items?
Chair Rabbit?
Sure. Director
I'll
Hanning.
go ahead and move consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. And I'll look real quickly. Drew, anyone from the public want to speak on consent today?
I don't see members of the public with their hands up at the moment, Chair Rabbit.
And since these are action items, I guess we need to go ahead and take a roll call.
Your roll call, certainly. Supervisor Arnold,
Aye.
Supervisor Connolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia,
Yes.
Supervisor Gorin,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucan,
Yes.
Mayor McConnell,
Aye.
Supervisor Pedrosa, Vice Chair Hannigan,
Aye.
and Chair Rabbit.
Aye. Great. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to our reports today. The discussion and information items. 4.1 is talking about public engagement. And I think we have Bart Nye from Caltrans to give us an update.
All right. Can you guys hear and see me?
We can.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. Yeah, we'll give you a quick update on our shared integrated public outreach and internal communications strategy. So we've developed an internal communications team that all of our staffs can participate in weekly. They can choose to join on Wednesdays at 11:30, and we go over all of the different things that are going on State Route 37 from a public purview. So that could be anything for us at Caltrans, could be anything from maintenance to construction, but it also involves the outreach that we're doing with the Pell and the DAA and all the other things that are in the State Route 37 galaxy. We did recently hold a field tour that originally our director, Toke Samashakan, was supposed to take part in. He unfortunately was called away, but we did have an opportunity to get the executive team out to the site for a tour that involved a bus ride out to Sonoma Point Raceway. And the focus of that was really the interim project from Mare Island to 121. So there was a good effort with getting out there and looking at the project together. The upcoming public outreach that we've got for the end of this year and moving into next year, we're working on a State Route 37 flood reduction project scoping meeting that should be before the end of the year. And then in January, we'll have the next Pell planning and environmental linkages effort happening roughly in January. So those dates still have to be finalized. The other thing that we've done is we've made an effort to do a communications partnership team. So the lead communicators from different agencies have gotten together a couple of times this year to discuss where we're at with our outreach to the public and what those challenges are. And we've been frank. Sometimes I know this might be hard to believe, but sometimes our organizations don't agree. So this group has tried to take a look at, okay, how can we put the best public face forward, working together to solve the issues for State Route 37 that are complex. There's many things going on. So that's been a fairly good strategy for us working together, and we hope to continue that. So that's a snapshot of what we've been doing as far as outreach.
That's great. Thank you, Bart. Anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? Not seeing any. Just say thank you for the work, and we'll continue on. We'll move on to 4.2, Caltrans SHOPP. I'm sorry, does anyone have anything? No. 4.2 is Caltrans SHOPP project updates. And we have Ricky, and Ricky, I'm sorry, I'll probably butcher your last name. Is it Gao?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Gao. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky. Go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen first. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricky Gao, Caltrans Regional Project Manager for State Route 37 and Napa. So I'm going to present Caltrans State Highway Operation and Protection Program projects on State Route 37. As you can see my screen, we have 6 Caltrans SHOPP projects which are active right now, and going from marine side to Sonoma side, we have the pavement project, and then followed by a flood reduction and also a bridge rehab, and the 2 projects at the 121 intersection, and another project at the Sonoma side at 2 intersections, Wilson Avenue and the Fairground Drive. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk details about these 6 projects. This map is just showing the geographic locations of these projects. Go to the next slide. So the first project is in Marine. This is the pavement rehab projects and capital maintenance program, which is from 101 to Petaluma River, which is this one from here, 101 to Petaluma River. So this project is to resurface the existing pavement, replace and upgrade existing concrete barrier and guardrails, as well as install vegetation control under the guardrails. Currently, the project is in the environmental phase, and we target to release a draft environmental document by March of next year, 22, and finish the environmental phase by August 22, and ready to list the project by May of 24, and the construction will begin in February 25 and last until middle of 26. So that's the marine pavement rehab project. And the next one is the flood reduction project, spanning from Marine to Sonoma County, which is this one here from US 101 all the way to 121 intersection. And this project is to address the reoccurring flooding due to seasonal rain and high tide event as the interim improvement projects until mid-century. Right now, the project is also in the environmental phase, and we plan to hold the public scoping meeting in November of this year, in about a month, and then release the draft environmental document by July of 2022, and finish the environmental phase by March 23, and list the project in July 26, and begin construction in May 27. So that's the Marine Sonoma flood reduction project. And the next one is the Petaluma River Bridge preservation project. And this project is to replace the existing timber fender system and upgrade the bridge rail. You can see the Petaluma River Bridge picture on the screen, and also to rehab the bridge deck, including the resurfacing on the bridge. And this project is also in the environmental phase. We will release the draft environmental document in April 22 and finish the environmental phase by October 22, ready to list in July 24, and begin construction by February 25. Those are our target milestones. And the next 2 projects are at a 121 intersection. As you can see, this is a 121 intersection aerial photo. So the first project is to reconstruct the intersection of SR 37 and 121. And this is an operational improvement project. The goal is to improve the operation and relieve traffic congestion. We are considering 2 alternatives. One is to reconfigure it to a continuous T intersection at this location. And another alternative is to consider the roundabout at the existing intersection. We are also at the environmental phase, and the draft environmental document is targeted for April of 2022 and finish the environmental phase by October 22, ready to list March 24, and begin construction in September 24. At the same location, we have another project, which is to also to improve the operation at this location. This is a lane extension project. As you can see a diagram here, this project is to widening SR37, including the Tully Creek Bridge and the smart railroad crossing. And by extending the lane drop from currently is right after the intersection. As you can see here on the screen, the cars are merging right after the intersection from 2 lanes to 1 lane. And then we will, this project will extend the merging past the railroad, smart railroad, and also past the Tully Creek to somewhere here to allow longer storage lanes for the cars to merge after the signal light. And hence relieve the congestion at this intersection. This project we target to release the draft environmental document by April of 22, finish environmental phase by October of 22, and ready to list in March 24, and begin construction in September 24. So that's the intersection and the lane extension project at the 121 intersection. Lastly, but not the least, we have a pedestrian safety enhancements project, which is at the 2 locations near Vallejo. One is at the Wilson Avenue, another one is at the Fairgrounds Drive. And this project is to install the safety enhancements at these 2 locations. And also the project is in the environmental phase, and we plan to finish the environmental phase by May 22 and ready to list in 24, and begin construction in September of 24. So that's a quick overview of Caltrans SHOPP projects and the status. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. We had a question though from the public that asked what a continuous T intersection is. So in the 37-121 intersection, can you explain that?
Sure. Right now at this intersection, you can see the cars have to stop at all the travel lanes going to the east direction will have to stop at the intersection by the traffic light. The continuous T intersection will build a barrier around here. So for the car going straight on this intersection, they do not have the signal light, and the signal light will only stop the cars turning left. That's the T intersection concept.
Great, thank you.
Continuous T. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. If we can pull down the screen share, and I could look to my colleagues to see if there's any questions, comments, concerns on the SHOPP drawing presentation. Not seeing any.
I saw Supervisor Gorin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Gorin, please.
I expect you to see me raising my physical hand. That didn't quite work. Thank you. I want to follow up on the question. As you know, we've had so many different improvements for that intersection at the raceway, and none of them have solved the congestion. And in fact, some of them worsened congestion, so that we now have huge congestion going up Lakeville Highway, Stagecoach Road, and into Sonoma and Napa Valley that way. So could you help me understand why the proposed improvements that you are suggesting will make a difference in alleviating the congestion for those left-hand turn folks going into Sonoma and Napa Valley? Because maybe I'm a little dense. I don't quite get your diagram.
For the congestion, for the intersection improvement project, right now all the cars stop at the intersection by the signal light going eastbound on 37. The proposed continuous T intersection will not stop the cars going straight, so they can keep going and without any delay at this intersection. And the signal light will only stop the cars going turning left. So effectively, there's less delay for the cars going straight. So that's the concept of relieve the congestion. Probably will not completely solve the congestion, but will relieve the congestion by doing such improvement. And this is not only improvement; it has to go hand by hand with the other project, which is at the same location. I introduced the lane extension project by extending the lane merge from 2 lanes to 1 lane at right past this intersection, allow more storage passing the signal light going east for cars to merge. So that way there's more car throughput and relieve the congestion. So
thank you for that explanation. Let me ask one more follow-up question. One of the problems that we had before the restriping occurred was that the dangerous driving of cars continuing east would travel in the left-hand lane and then merge into the right-hand lane at the very last minute. So do you have mechanisms in the design to encourage people or force people to stay in the continuous left-hand turn lane and not be able to merge at the very last minute into the other lanes?
I thank you for this question. I will take it back and discuss with our design team and make sure we have mechanism or including signage to encourage cars move back to the left-hand lane and prior to the last minute. So thank you for that question.
I appreciate that and know that signage, especially on the pavement, is not going to do it because people are going to jump that queue. So figure out how we not go back, how we improve the intersection and the flow, but not go back to where we were before. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you. If I'm understanding your design, how it would operate, there would be no opportunity to turn left going on State Route 37 to Vallejo from 121. So it's a right turn out only. Is that correct?
And you mean from 37?
If you could bring up that diagram again, please, it might be helpful for the conversation.
So 30, sorry, go back to
almost.
Yeah, almost here. I want to enlarge it. So no. you can you see my screen?
That's the part going straight through.
Right.
I'm kind of going 121 and I want to turn left and go to Vallejo. There's a barrier there, right?
Right. Then we will have other design or mechanism to let the motorist aware in advance and be prepared to shift to the left lanes prior to approach this intersection. And similarly for these cars, if you stuck on the right lane and at the intersection, you will not able to turn left anyway because the lane configuration already set the way that if for the left turners, you should would merge to left turn lanes prior to at this intersection.
Yes, I understand that. I believe that was Director Gorin's question as well. No, I'm talking about I'm coming on 121.
Okay.
Now we come to the intersection at State Route 37.
Right.
Can I turn left and go to Vallejo? Because there's a barrier here.
the barrier is, I believe, yes, you can. The barrier is only for these cars on 137 going to the east, but will not stop the 121 turning left to Vallejo. The barrier will stop in the middle of intersection. So the 121 cars, they can turn left and merge to Vallejo.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mhm.
And Dina, I saw your hand up.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add regarding the questions from Supervisor Coram. So the project team right now is considering actually an actual physical barrier to separate the through lanes from the turning lanes. So I know Ricky will probably come back with additional opportunities on how we ensure that the separations happen so that there's no queue jumpers at the last minute.
Thank you, Dina. In this close-up diagram, I do see that there's a barrier there. I'm not sure how far. It looks like it extends maybe 10 car lengths or something, but I appreciate the clarification. That may help, but there may be some queue jumping and maybe collisions in the barrier. You never know. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? If you want to take down the screen again, it'd be great. Perfect. Anyone else have any questions, comments on this one? I would imagine that we would just, obviously you need adequate queuing for the left-hand turn lane so that you're not backing up either traffic or making it easier for people to want to jump lanes too. So appreciate that. Look forward to the work being done coming forward. Before we move on then to our next item, there are a couple people with their hands raised, and I thought I would go ahead and ask them for their comments. First up is Steve Bertelbaugh.
Let's see.
All right, Steve.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and the barrier looks very interesting. What changes are going to be made in order to favor carpools at the lane drops so that people that are not carpooling can see the carpools moving ahead faster than they do?
For the SHOPP projects, right now we don't have the carpool lanes built into this project.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for that question, Steve. With that, we'll bring it back. Say thank you very much, Ricky. Thanks for the presentation. Look forward to the continued work. And we'll move on then to 4.3, Sears Point to Mare Island Interim Project with Kevin Chen. Kevin?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Kevin Chen with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I'm here to provide a quick update on item 4.3, Sears Point to Mare Island Interim Project, where we are proposing to provide an HOV lane in this middle portion of the corridor that would make transit viable, as well as it would really encourage a mode shift from solo drivers to the use of carpooling on this corridor. The project team continues to make good progress in the development of the draft environmental document. Currently, we are targeting to circulate the draft EIR by late November, pending on Caltrans review and approval to release the document. Once it's released, we plan to hold a public meeting sometime in early December, and the public would have 45 days to review and provide comments on the draft EIR. Also, as noted in the agenda, we are moving forward with a new project name, which is going to be Highway 37 Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project. So you'll be seeing this new project name in upcoming public notifications. That really concludes my brief update on this project. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Anyone have any questions for Kevin? Not seeing any hands raised. Thank you, Kevin, for that quick update. We appreciate that. With that, I'll move on.
Chair Rabbit, I see a member of the public wishing to speak on this item.
David Schoenbrunn, please go ahead.
Hey, David, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Kevin through the chair, is the Caltrans team looking at eliminating additional fill for shoulders so as to complete this project in a much more accelerated fashion?
Go ahead, Kevin, if you can.
Yeah, so we are being very mindful about the environmental setting of this corridor. So we are evaluating a range of different alternatives in the EIR, including different shoulder widths. So that will be included in the EIR, in the draft EIR that will be circulated.
Thank you for that. Ed Schultz.
All right, Ed, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, question is, are you, you're including the modification to intersection 121 with your project? Is that the right question?
Yeah,
Hello?
so with the project, I think it's kind of related to an earlier question. We are looking for ways that if we can, for example, in the eastbound direction, if we can commence the HOV lane west of the intersection to really provide that opportunity for HOVs to have a queue jump to bypass the queues. So that's part of the, I guess, the design that we are considering in this interim project. But you know, we're going to continue to coordinate with Caltrans on the SHOPP project as well, because we do want to stay coordinated between the different projects.
Thank you for that. And Rick, is it Rick Freitas?
Okay, Rick, I've permitted you to speak.
Okay, going back to 4.2 at the intersection of 121 and 37, have you taken into consideration the smart crossing in your calculations at that intersection?
And that was the previous previous item. I guarantee
4.2 regarding the reconstruction of 37 121 interchange, and they mentioned all of these upgrades, but I'm wondering, they didn't mention the smart crossing at that intersection also, because the train's going to come through possibly, and that's going to affect traffic. So I'm wondering if that's been considered, how you've considered dealing with that.
I guarantee you that it's taken into consideration. To the level of improvements, I'm not sure, but I guarantee you that it's taken into consideration. Speaking on behalf of Ricky, Dina, tell me if I'm wrong. If there's anyone else, we will move on. That was a quick update on the, not going to call it the interim project anymore, but we're going to call it the Highway 37 Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project. There must be an acronym in there somewhere, but we'll look for that. We'll move on to 4.4, which is the US 101 to State Route 121 Design Alternative Analysis. And we have Stephanie Hom from MTC and Jody Kettleson from TY Lin here with us today. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Stephanie Hom with MTC. We have Jody Kettleson from our TY Lin consulting group who's assisting us on this project to give an update. So I'll leave it to Jody.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. Super. So we've been doing frequent updates of the design alternatives assessment and support for the State Route 37 Ultimate Sea Level Rise Resilient Corridor. And I say ultimate because I just want to underscore that differently than the SHOPP programs, this is looking at the long-term horizon for when the inundations in this along this reach may result in no longer being able to just do small projects to improve the access over the long-term inundation. And so for those that have followed this project, we have done extensive outreach and collecting of existing reports so that we could get a full range of alignments and alternatives to consider. In the interest of thinking about this transportation holistically with all the multimodals, we have ensured that our footprint does include transit-friendly access. It does include the grades so that rail can be accommodated. It does include a class 1 bike and ped path. But really what we're looking at, rather than those level of details, is which corridor should it remain on the SR 37 corridor, or is there a more appropriate long-term alignment where 37 might be more appropriate? And so what we've done is looked at everything between SR 37 and between 101 and 121. So basically between Marin and then the Sears Point, Sonoma Raceway area. But we realized that those are not necessarily destinations in themselves. So we did, of course, consider the long-term ultimate sea level rise corridor that was already prepared in the central reach, which is from 121 to Mare Island. So you'll see that those alignments were considered when we chose our destinations. And so as I go through the slides, that'll become more apparent, and I'll repeat myself. But what I want to present to you today is that the design alternatives assessment, again, is looking mainly at alignments. So we're really high level, but we need to narrow in fairly efficiently so that we can study things to the level of detail that people want to know and inform the decision makers ultimately. So the first phase after we've have our range of alternatives is to determine whether the alignments are strongly supporting the purpose and need. And I will remind everybody that the DAA, this long-term horizon, and the PEL, which Caltrans is leading, have aligned their purpose and need. So we are being consistent with the long-term study for the entire corridor, even if we're looking only between 101 and 121. And so after we narrow the range of alternatives to those that are strongly supporting the purpose and need and or do not conflict with strong regulatory restrictions, then we can go and compare those subsets of alternatives. So that's what I'm going to be talking about right now, is this step 1. So as you can see here, 101 is where these segments end. The center is 121, and then these kind of dashed lines are those alignments that were looked at previously in the ultimate design alternatives assessment for 121 to Mare Island. There were already some before today's presentation that were basically screened because they conflicted with really national regional resources, such as the San Pablo National Wildlife Preserve. And we also looked at, on SR 37, the rail corridor is parallel, and we thought so the ask was, should we stay on 131 or should we take the rail corridor? And it looked like the rail corridor also had to widen it to accommodate roadway and other transportation modes would greatly conflict with the National Wildlife Reserve. So those two have already been, in essence, let go, because there are equally strong alignments that do not have these bifurcations, if you will, of valuable resources. And so the screening then looked at transportation related ways to narrow the range of alternatives. And if you will, the purpose of the project is to preserve SR 37 regional transportation corridor, not necessarily the roadway, but the regional transportation corridor. And so intuitively, if most of the flows today and the land uses have built around this corridor, then intuitively pushing persons onto this northern type routes would add miles or be out of direction. But we wanted to verify that with modeling. I just want to take a moment to show you that while we initially just had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now we are starting to name the alternatives. So we have A1 being on alignment, A2 being across the bay, 3 being near, kind of hugging close to the Atherton Black Point Mountain there. And then this Burdell Hog Island that crosses over as for And then 6 was these northern alternatives. So we're going to start to transition to alternative names. So just to remind everybody that the transportation screening was focusing on preserving a regional transportation corridor. And we first looked at the regional model. We have needed to go to alternative methods, and I'll explain. And so then I'll present you the results. The focus was whether we are adding vehicle miles traveled on a daily daily screening, and whether there would be increased potential due to these changes in alignment. So the regional model, I know everybody's aware, it covers a 9 county-wide area, and our project area is right in the center, fairly small portion of the overall 9 county region and all the land uses that are balanced in that. The regional model focuses on developing an overall air quality projection based on vehicle miles traveled, and is projected to through 2040, and that's it. It turns out that this regional model had some limitations for our needs. This area, even though it seems very macro to us because we're covering 4 counties, in terms of land use, it was not disaggregated finely enough so that we were getting intuitive results. So models are only as good as they work in reality, and our reality is much different than what we were receiving in the regional model. So we went to another mode of anticipating how vehicle miles would change over time. And what we did is we relied on an existing report, the Transportation Feasibility Report, that had really done a lot of detail in tracking the top 10 origin and destination pairs. And that's what you see here in the color codes on the far left. So you have the origin being Vallejo and the destination being Novato, vice versa in the opposite commute hours. And then you have that representing 6.4% of all daily travel trips for approximately 3,000 trips per day. And so if we took these top 10, that represents 34% of all the trips on a daily route. And so this is a sample. It's a very generous sample, but it is not the entire vehicle miles traveled origin destinations that use SR37 daily. So we just focused on what we knew and looked at the alternatives. If you were to do this route every day, but you had to change per one of our alignments that we were looking at, what would the delta be? And we did project these trips according to the region's VMT projections. And so what we looked at here was the no build. What if all of a sudden nothing had been done, these improvements, they just couldn't keep up, and the roadway was completely inundated and it really just didn't serve the regional transportation travel any longer. And it looked to us through this projection of the top 10 O&D trips, the increase in vehicle miles traveled would be over 19% just for that 30%. If you were to take A6, which are these northern routes up here, it looked like the VMT for those top 10 would increase by 12%. And then this one right here, A4, I5, which basically comes over the Hog Island and then comes up midway. It's kind of like your mid-northern route. The increase was 8%. And so as you come down here, just the Burdell Hog Island to SR37, or the what we're calling Bahia Atherton alternative to SR37, or the on alignment SR37, you had under 5%, which again, this is, since this is a sampling piece, it's not everything, and we felt that that was a fair. It was still operating consistent with the purpose and need. The overbay, which is very interesting, it does cut down some of the travels for the more dominant pairs, had a decrease of 2%. So that's very interesting for us to help us narrow in on what's going to be important in preserving the regional transportation corridor. Similarly, we looked at congestion, because vehicle miles traveled is can be one indicator, but if you're stuck idling for a very long time because congestion is increasing, it doesn't matter how many vehicle miles you're going, the greenhouse gas emissions are increasing anyway. And so we looked at whether these alternatives could possibly worsen existing congestion. And so for these top three, we found that there were the tendencies to have more worsening on more of these adjacent or nearby segments of roadways because going on that route would force travelers to find shorter routes and build on existing transportation corridors and add congestion. And so we found again that the no build, the northern routes, if you will, more or less had more potential to worsen more segments of the regional transportation corridor. So what this has done is it has allowed us to feel fairly confident to look at those alternatives that are not increasing VMT as much. And again, I say as much because the regional traffic model has some limitations. It would be very interesting to take the regional transportation model and have a kind of a 4-county, southern 4-county traffic model to understand whether these, whether the other O&D pairs also add to the VMT or could find some reductions in VMT. But we didn't have the luxury of that time and resources at this time. So we felt very confident that we could take these corridors through our more detailed comparison. And I just want to emphasize that we're looking long-term. Our DAA is looking at a 100-year time frame. So again, it's multimodal focus. It's looking at options that where really should the alignment be. I didn't focus on this, but the reason we looked at even alignments that were off of alignment was that this area is looked at to be flooding quite extensively. And so while the northern alignments were way outside the floodplain and could continue on existing routes once they were widened to accommodate the regional transportation corridor, these A4 and A3 went through a narrower piece of the floodplain, whereas A1 and A2 is going basically over water that would be extensively inundated frequently. And so again, we'd have a longer elevated roadway. So I just wanted to point that out, that these weren't just, okay, why not change alignment, but there was actually a purpose. So obviously Lakeview Road would be raised in a few pieces, but it could remain out of the water, and then there'd be a shorter crossing. So potentially a shorter element of elevated infrastructure. Same with A3. So just to kind of summarize, we used the travel behavior feasibility study, which looked at the traffic patterns from 2019. Those were the top 10 that we chose, and they had adequate and fairly recent numbers to them. We also used the performance measures that is called a PEMS from Caltrans hosted website, so we could verify the average daily traffic volumes, and then we used the annual growth rate of 0.8% a year, again, just to be consistent with the traffic models of today. And we obviously want to underscore that this wasn't an exhaustive traffic screening process. It doesn't look at changes in land use over time that a more full, robust model would do. It only reflects change and associated with where that alignment would go with the increase in vehicles traveled. So here we are. Here, the next time I come to present our results, we will be presenting the results of evaluating and comparing this set of alternatives. So if I can walk through really briefly, the lines on this map represent blue for causeway, meaning an elevated long bridge and or a bridge. So anything that's basically supported by piers. The at grade means that we're out of the floodplain and we do not have to raise the road further than the 100-year projected floodplain. And then the wider orange is where there's a possibility that one could use the engineering technique of embankment, basically a raised dike. We did, of course, accommodate for culverts, so there would be some hydrologic connectivity through the embankment, but for the most part, it would be a kind of a lifted fill roadway. And so from starting from SR 37, we looked at two potential on alignment alternatives. One that we're calling a hybrid, which basically means that where we needed a bridge, we provided a wider bridge to allow future floodplain floods and hydrologic connectivity to be more accommodated than it is today. Then we at-grade, of course, when we could be at-grade, we were at-grade, and then otherwise we were using embankment. And then we also looked at one that was completely causeway, except for where it could be at-grade. The over bay alternative is designed where we're using embankment on the land areas, and then it becomes a long causeway, and this leg up to 121 does become necessary. We looked at the traffic model and it said that basically at 121 as well as Lakeville Highway, 30% of all traffic at those intersections is coming and going or leaving from those intersections. And so to cross over the bay would not be adequately preserving a regional transportation corridor for the practical purposes of what's happening today. So then we have two others. I mentioned the Bahia Atherton that comes across and it basically avoids some sensitive wetlands, but then cuts quickly down so that as to not intrude with the airport, and then becomes at grade at the base of the Atherton hillside. And then the other one, like I said, the Burdell Island that goes up Lakeville Highway at grade and then comes over as a causeway. So these are the the five that we will be evaluating. We also just wanted to update because we are looking at 22 comparative evaluation criteria that we wanted to be consistent with the DAA all the way to Mare Island. And so we are carrying through obviously the overbay all the way over, as well as the on alignment with a hybrid as well as a causeway alternative. So that's what we're coming back with at next time. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'll look to my colleagues. If we could pull down the screen, that's great. Thank you.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'll look to my colleagues for questions. I see Director Lucan.
Yeah, so, those are definitely some very, very interesting alignments. Appreciate that you've looked at everything, but I'm sure that's going to cause a lot of questions, concerns from a lot of folks as well. So what really is the vetting process for this or next step? I know you show those maps to a couple people, and a lot of people in neighborhoods, especially kind of in the northern Marin area, will have lots of opinions. So where do we go from here?
Right. So like I said, we did this kind of high level screening based on whether we were indeed meeting the purpose of need, or at least stronger, seeking alternatives that more strongly support a piece of purpose and need. But then here we are looking at 22 different criteria, and those are criteria that support the categories of social equity, the built environment, the natural resources, transportation, and fiscal being wise fiscally with your tax dollars. And so those criteria, even though those are 5 categories, there are 22 different specific criteria we're going to evaluate so that we can compare and look at which of the alternatives really rise to the top to be less impactful and still preserving the transportation corridor. So it's certainly not over yet. We are, again, this is one of the elements that was requested not only by individuals, but really by the resource agencies, basically saying, okay, so we have this old roadway. If it's going to be inundated, do we want to really continue something that maybe is not in the right location over the long run? Remember, there's these interim projects, and then there's this long horizon. Even 100 years out, we're looking at making sure that this alignment could be resilient over that long of a horizon. So if you're going to build it that big and that substantial, are we really building it in the right place? So that's what we're trying to answer at this moment.
All right, and just as a follow-up to that, how much of the rail alignment was brought into that overall consideration as well, or was this more focused on the roadway?
You know, we've had a lot of questions on that, and one of the absolute design criteria that our DAA used, and I'm not speaking for any other studies, is that rail could be accommodated. So we've looked at this basically as a transportation corridor rather than just a roadway, just a bike path, just a rail corridor. And so again, I just need to emphasize that it's an alignment evaluation more than it's a mode, but certainly we did just the exercise that I showed you was looking at a regional transportation corridor and how it's used today. And so we did look at VMT for that, which is of course roadway oriented, but all of these designs can accommodate the grades that rail would need to be in the same corridor, if that were the choice.
Director Pedrosa.
Thank you, Chair Rabbit, and Jody, thank you for a great presentation, great visuals. And I just got to ask, and maybe this is covered, but very interested in the cost with every alternative, just to try to understand and ground this a little bit more on what it's going to take to achieve.
I understand that, and that is important. And that's actually, while I said that we're trying to get a comparison of alignments, we really did have to ground truth how these alternatives would be built and if they could be built, right? Because there is a severe bay mud issue that's moves and it undulates, and anyway, it has a lot of changes. And so we went through a lot of design effort just to confirm whether these engineering techniques could be viable. And that's why you see it divided between causeway and embankment and at grade, so that we could be realistic with that criteria. So that is one of the criteria, the construction cost. And then another criteria is the long-term maintenance or life cycle costs, they call them. So that will be part of the 22 criteria that I come back with. But yes, we're talking about billions, and I know everybody knows that, but we're not ready to share those numbers yet, but that is a criteria.
No, and I appreciate that, Jody. And I don't want to hinder our ability to do the right thing long term. Yeah. I think we just have to, as you said, ground truth it on what is possible to financially. So again, anything over the bay just is a concern. For those concerns on MTC, we know how expensive those type of projects can get. So again, but again, appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McConnell.
Yes, as you move forward in your review of this, will you be giving consideration to the integration between the road route along with both SMART and the possible integration into BART and ferry traffic patterns?
Well, to the extent that a rail can be accommodated in these grades, that's probably as far as we've gone. We are really high level for something of this magnitude to change a route. There are several layers of studies that need to be conducted. And it's so interesting. People want this evaluation, and yet they want details as though we're, environmentally clearing the alignment already. And so I just have to say that no, we haven't gone to that level of detail yet. If the Pell process were to narrow the alignments, I feel like that's when we could dive into yet more and more detail on how actually this could feasibly be built. And that kind of information would be very useful.
Well, I appreciate that it's early in the process, but if we're going to integrate the entirety of the transportation system throughout the Bay Area, I think it's essential to start thinking about the tying in of this roadway along with BART and with SMART, and also with the ferry system, which all comes together in this part of the Bay. So I would urge you to start considering that as you move forward.
Yes, and rail can be accommodated. This is certainly not looking at a ferry project, but you're right. All of that, the intermodal connectivity is important, certainly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Arnold.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for this report. I'm just wondering if you could get a little more specific about the process. What is the process for these alternative alignments to be finalized and vetted?
Okay, thank you. So this design alternatives assessment was sponsored by SB1 through MTC's guidance. We advanced the study just a little bit in advance of the larger long-term Pell corridor study. And we have been working closely with Caltrans to make sure that we are aligned so that our information can be fed up to the Pell. And ultimately, a regional transportation corridor should look at how it's connected between other regional transportation corridors. And so the Pell will look at 101 to I-80, and we are able to focus in on this, like in essence, it's not micro, but it's more detailed of natural resources and built environment, and are able to feed our information up to that Pell where those decisions can be made. So just in the short, we will evaluate lots of criteria, lots of data, hand it forward, where probably the more definitive decisions can be made than in our process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Anyone else? And I think, Drew, if we can go to the folks in the attendees list who'd like to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. First on the list I see is David Schonbrunn. David, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Mr. Chair, at the beginning of this meeting, you heard a whole series of comments expressing concern about VMT increases and GHG increases that will come as the result of capacity increases from this project. What we've just heard had an extensive set of data on VMT comparing alternatives. However, those VMT expressions are fundamentally misleading. At the Pell meeting, I vigorously questioned Ms. Kettleson about the question of increased capacity of the project. And at that time, she admitted that yes, these figures do not include induced demand caused as a result of increasing the capacity. So I want to stress that the VMT numbers that we're seeing today are not in any way evaluable from the standpoint of the overall project increase in VMT. And as such, I have to really complain that this presentation is fundamentally deceptive. And she was already on notice that this is a serious issue and chose not to refine her presentation to provide useful VMT increased numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next in line I have is Barbara Saltzman. Barbara, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Okay, I've unmuted. Thank you. I'm representing Marin Audubon Society, and along the lines of what Mr. Lucan suggested, yeah, I'd like to express our ongoing concern. I've expressed this at several other meetings earlier about the alignments through the Bahia, Atherton area, as well as a little bit further north on Miramonte. The Bahia one is improved slightly. It used to go right through the marsh. Now it's a little bit north, but they're still very close to the marsh. And we'll have, of course, serious mudflat settlement issues. But the most concern we have is about the habitat impacts, even though they're on maybe on a causeway, that they would still go through important habitat and important wetland areas, and that is an ongoing concern about these alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next in line I have is Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I am curious how the traffic models would change if VMT is reduced by, say, 50% due to the climate crisis.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Chair Rabbit, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak.
Great, thank you very much, Drew. Appreciate that. I will bring it back to the board, and I know that Director Smith has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, one or two commenters impugning the character or professionalism of some of the team is annoying at best, and I would like to express my support for the hard work that has gone into this and the fact that it is a study that looks at all of the things, not just the things certain people want looked at. Having said that, I also want to point out that while folks have been, especially in the public comment portion, very interested in the rail aspect, we don't have bus service in this corridor. And given the nature of this corridor and the dispersed sort of travel, it's not like everybody goes from one city to a second city. Bus transit is a very important portion of what we need to be looking at to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So no one mentioned bus service in the public comment, and I just wanted to make sure you know that the professionals looking at all of the alternatives and what's needed in the corridor acknowledge that while rail is a piece of a puzzle, it is not the sole answer, and we need bus service as well. So I think that was it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. I think that spot on all fronts. Can't thank you enough for the work and looking at these things. I know that we do have people that are kind of single-minded in one direction, and I think it's important that we look at the entire picture as we go forward. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any final thoughts on this before we move on? Not seeing any. We'll move on then to item 4.5, which is the corridor planning and environmental linkages with Chris Caputo from Caltrans. Chris?
Morning. I already shared my screen, which is good. Good morning, committee members. My name's Chris Caputo. I'm one of the Caltrans co-leads for the State Route 37 Planning and Environmental Linkages study. Today's presentation is an update on the latest progress on the Pell study. See if I can get this to advance here. As you recall, and for other members who might be on the phone today, our Pell study, which is the first study of its kind conducted in California on the state highway system, is an integrated planning approach that recognizes the need to link short as well as long-range transportation planning and corridor level planning done by the state and local governments to the planning processes performed by environmental protection, historic preservation, resource conservation, and land use management agencies. To orient you, this schedule shows where we are in the Pell process and some of the key milestones and accomplishments we've achieved this year. Over the course of this year, the Pell team has collaborated extensively with our partner agencies, numerous stakeholders, and regulatory agencies to develop and refine the project purpose. Over the coming months, we will also be finalizing our evaluation criteria, developing alternatives, and subjecting those alternatives to a tiered screening process. This slide details the extensive stakeholder and agency outreach the Pell team has undertaken over the course of this year. Recently, the team hosted a stakeholder working group meeting on September 24th. The discussion focused on the refined purpose statements and an update on the DAA alternatives. Participants provided a lot of valuable feedback during the meeting, and the Pell team has continued to collaborate with the stakeholders to address their concerns. On August 27th, the Pell team hosted a regulatory agency partners meeting to present to that group a refined project purpose and an overview of the process the Pell team will be using to develop evaluation criteria to screen alternatives. Over the coming months, the Pell team will meet again with the stakeholder working group and the regulatory agency partners to discuss the evaluation criteria and alternatives being developed for the Pell. And then finally, we're planning to conduct a public meeting for the Pell during the last week of this coming January. During that meeting, we anticipate presenting the final project purpose, evaluation criteria, and alternatives that will be subject to screening in the Pell. Just to remind everybody, this word cloud reflects the key concerns within the corridor as identified by our stakeholders. Identifying and discussing the needs within the corridor has shaped the development of a robust and comprehensive purpose statement for the corridor. This slide and the following two slides show the evolution of the purpose statement. On the left are the elements of the project purpose as presented at the March 26th stakeholder working group meeting. The Pell team gathered input and initially revised the purpose elements as you see on the right, clarifying elements you see here in blue. Please note at the bottom of the screen that we also added a statement to address equity within the corridor. The purpose was further reviewed after additional comments were received and with input from the town hall and public meetings that we held. Afterward, the 4 North Bay County transportation agencies, MTC and Caltrans, decided to have an overarching purpose statement for the corridor. This statement is for both the Pell and the DAA study. After receiving further comments, the purpose statement was refined even further. Our team has worked very hard to advance the Pell process while making sure we're doing our due diligence to seek and incorporate input on the Pell purpose from the large number of stakeholders and regulatory agency partners involved in the process. At our stakeholder working group meeting on July 30th, we received a lot of input on the refined purpose statement and the update to the DAA alternatives. Amongst the comments were requests for clarification as to why certain input on the purpose statements was not incorporated, and requests for clarification regarding the definition of terms used in the project purpose. We specifically met with representatives from the Baylands Group and the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Board on August 20th. To follow up on concerns raised during the July 30th meeting. We followed up further with comments and input received by providing written responses and explanations on how we are interpreting the language in the project purpose. We believe the responses we've provided will advance a common understanding of the project purpose and that most of the unresolved questions and concerns will be resolved through our collaborative process to establish evaluation criteria that will be used to screen potential corridor alternatives. Finally, this is where we've ended up with the purpose statement after the stakeholder engagement I've just described. We sincerely appreciate all the valuable and meaningful feedback provided on the project purpose and look forward to continuing to collaborate with our stakeholders as we move forward. As a next step in finalizing the project purpose statement, the project leadership team had the opportunity to present the purpose statement to the executive steering committee earlier this week. The committee provided guidance on a few final revisions, which recommended eliminating the word promoting in the second bullet and adding the words transit and before the word multimodal in the last bullet. The team is currently reviewing the revisions for consistency with stakeholder input received to date. And at the conclusion of our discussion, the ESC indicated their support for the purpose statement as revised. Our next steps for the PEL involve establishing 3 technical working groups who will hold their first meetings next week. The 3 groups will be focused on design, traffic, and the environment. Each of these technical working groups will focus on technical issues pertaining to establishing the PEL evaluation criteria, alternatives, and the screening process. And we look forward to taking these next steps in the process with our stakeholders and with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. If we could turn the slide off so we can see each other.
You got it.
Thank you. And I'll look to my colleagues to see if there's any questions, comments, or concerns on this particular issue. Not seeing anyone raise their hand. I will ask Drew if he can call on those in the public.
Yeah, sure. All right, let's see. This is Drew speaking through James's account. I've had some computer problems at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll start with David Schonbrunn. David, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that this purpose and need statement rejects comments that the PEL team heard pretty consistently over the course of the process about concerns over increasing GHG emissions caused by increasing capacity on a highway facility. And the PEL team has consistently refused to incorporate this input into the purpose and need statement. Some of us believe that it's absolutely a frontier consideration in determining a project. And so as a result, we're very unhappy with this purpose and need statement. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. Chair Rabbit, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak.
And I'll bring it back to my colleagues and see if there's any final questions, comments, or concerns. Not seeing any. Chris, I just want to say thank you for the work. Very much appreciated. And with that, we'll move. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to the 4.6, commute37.com, or the RideAmigos. Lloyd Nadal from Solano Transportation Authority and Dana Turi from Sonoma County Transportation Authority are here to give a presentation on this item.
Hey, everybody. I'm just waiting on, is Dana, are you on?
Lloyd, you're going solo. Okay.
All right. I'll go. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to speak about our Commute 37 ride sharing project. Again, my name is Lloyd Nadal with the STA. This is a project between the 4 North Bay counties, myself, Caitlin Costa from my staff, Diana Mihan from MBTA, Dana Ture from SCTA, and Scott McDonald from TAM. Here to talk about this ride sharing project that we're doing, funded by the BACMD, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which is going to start in January of 2022. So in terms of the commute profile, I think everyone's pretty much familiar with the commuter that the folks that are commuting through the 37. It was referenced earlier today that in 2019, there was an NVTA study that was with Farron Peers around the 37 travel behavior feasibility study, talking about some of these commuters. And so again, what was mentioned, there's currently no transit or active transportation alternatives. Transit's not feasible. There's the highest frequency of trips are westbound from Vallejo and Fairfield to Novato. As we know, our folks here in Solano know that it's basically a parking lot as they enter through Mare Island of Vallejo over to the west side. The average commuter is about 45 to 54 years old. about a 60% have a household income below the Bay Area. And then 50% travel the corridor daily or a few times a week, with 45% that use the corridor to get to work. So basically our project, and this is again funded through BACMID, which we're very thankful for, is really to decrease congestion and carbon emissions along the corridor through 4 of our counties. The goal obviously is to try to reduce, create awareness around our project and ride sharing options within the 4 counties, to increase the number of carpools and van pools, and then reduce the peak period travel time, which is typically 5 to 9 p.m. and also 3 to 7 in the evening. Now we know though that the recent studies show that about 25% of the commute or folks have returned to work, and we know that that keeps getting pushed back because of COVID and the Delta. And so, we're very cognizant of, some of the things and try to be flexible in our project based on how things are going, which is sort of unpredictable in some way. So how are we going to do this? So we're using a ride sharing tool called RideAmigos. So all 4 of our counties has this tool. This RideAmigos works with thousands of agencies and companies across the country and even internationally. It's got a lot of features, but the things that we're going to use it for here is that they're able to look at when folks sign in and log in, their origin destination patterns, and then pairing people up to try to encourage carpooling and vanpooling through the app. Also, it also can incentivize folks. So we plan to do a lot of trying to incentivize folks to consider these modes. And we're currently developing this online marketing incentive program, targeting users, specifically the residents of Solano County, because according to the study, a lot of Vallejo and Fairfield residents are the ones that are commuting over to the employers of Marin, typically Novato, but obviously there's a lot of movement going throughout all 4 counties. So in terms of the timeline, we're launching this commute37.com website. Don't go there yet because it's not ready, but it will be in November. This project's going to be a 1-year pilot project, an ongoing incentive program with marketing that's going to start hopefully again from January to, in a 1-year time period. And then we're going to track the participation in the analytics for a final report. As you can see, we have a great designer in-house, Neil, who helped us put together this commute37.com logo. That'll be on the website and hopefully, trying to promote people to do this. And again, it's obviously we know it's going to be a challenge given just how people are traveling still and trying to work back and employers working back to traveling. But we feel we got to do it. It's a pilot, so we'll learn a lot from it, and hopefully we can come back, maybe 6 months from now, or even when the project ends, and report back to this policy committee about how we did. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I don't know if Dana was able to jump on for questions as well after.
Thank you. There she is.
Hey, Dana.
Anyone have any questions for? Not seeing any. Appreciate the work very much. There we go. We got a couple. I'm going to go to Mare Garcia first, then Kate Miller.
Well, thank you. I just, with Kate Miller, we had a presentation, MBTA. She probably remembers more clearly how far back, it was about a year or so ago on RideAmigos. Sounded very interesting. Something I was very interested in pursuing for reducing vehicle miles traveled throughout Napa Valley. Certainly, I would suggest that maybe, and you probably already are directing this way, go to the larger employers, find out where the commute pattern is. And I think that might be something that works out. My daily trip to Yountville some years ago, I noticed every now and then you'd see a car full of what would appear to be workforce going up at 6:30 in the morning. That's not visitors. But I think that might be a way of incrementally we can start reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled and improve congestion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge staff for pursuing the funding on this. We had initially been rejected by the Air District, and they refined the proposal and made it very interesting to the Air District, and ultimately got the funding. So I just wanted to reach out to all of the team, Lloyd and Dana and Diana and folks that worked on this project. So thanks.
Thank you. Director Hannigan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really appreciate the work, Lloyd. I think it's important for us to get, just general public input into this process. Folks don't always have time to participate in prescribed meeting dates and times. And so I think this is really important for that outreach. So I appreciate it. And I do like the logo. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Halls.
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. Well, Kate beat me to it. I wanted to thank staff. They really were persevered through about a year to get this funding together, and they've been working together. I want to acknowledge all the staff from the 4 agencies. And I think Mayor Garcia pointed out there's great opportunities for each county to work with your employers. So there's obviously the people that drive the corridor, but great opportunity. We're doing that with our local EDC. They're helping us do outreach with our employers. So I encourage you guys to do this. We're actually partnering with SACOG on the 80 corridor as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for all 4 counties to really expand our TDM options. So, but thanks again to staff.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have anything before we turn it over to the public? I see Steve Bertelbaugh and Drew, if you want to lead the public conversation.
Yeah, certainly. Alrighty, Steve, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see this going forward. I realize it's a really tough area to work in. I've watched a couple of these projects sort of time out, and I would really like to see us run this for more than a year, even though it may not look like it's doing very well in the first year. It takes a long while for people to get used to this, and we're already, I think, at something like 20% ride shares in the corridor. So driving that upward. And in connection with this, I really hope that the folks that are planning for the lane drop process will begin to look at giving carpools preference very early in the process. It looks like it's far down the road. So I think the two things go hand in hand. We're going to get more people to carpool if the carpools have a big advantage at the lane drops and soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Chair Rabbit, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Oh, never mind. Let's get that. We'll see Ed Schultze. Ed, I've permitted you to speak. You can start when you unmute yourself.
I just wanted to clarify my comment earlier about the long haulers of hay from the different states going to support Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino. They have to go across 37. And that was my point. Not it was out of state, but they do have to cross 37 to support our coastal counties. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, Chair Rabbit, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you for everyone for their comments. I'll bring it back and again, just say thank you to staff for working through on this particular item. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Dana. Great work. Appreciate it very much. With that, we're on to item number 5, which is committee member comments or staff updates. Is there anything from any of our staff members that they need to share today? I'm seeing some wagging heads, so I think we're probably good there. There's some future topics on the agenda, talking about tolling legislation, expenditure plan, restoration projects, funding opportunities, the San Pablo Bay, ultimate environmental phase discussion, comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, the design alternatives and TDM, the implementation, including a ride sharing program going forward. So just want to make that, call that to your attention. And then also let you know that I believe we're at the end of the agenda. If there's no other work for this body, we will be adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting is at 9:30 a.m. on January 7th. It says 2021. but I think that's 2022 in my book. So hopefully we'll figure out how we do our virtual versus in-person meeting sometime leading up to that. But thank you all for the work that's been going on and for the work that will be continuing going on until we meet again. So with that, I think we're adjourned.
Thank you.